Section 1 of The Autobiography of Charles Darwin. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Adam Marsatich, Alexandria, Virginia, June 2009. The Autobiography of Charles Darwin, edited by his son Francis Darwin. Section 1 Preface.
My father's autobiographical recollections, given in the present chapter, were written for his children, and written without any thought that they would ever be published. To many this may seem an impossibility, but those who knew my father will understand how it was not only possible, but natural. The autobiography bears the heading, Recollections of the Development of My Mind and Character, and end with the following note: August 3, 1876. This sketch of my life was begun about May 28th at Hope Dean, Mr. Hensley Wedgwood's house in Surrey, and since then I have written for nearly an hour on most afternoons. It will easily be understood that, in a narrative of a personal and intimate kind written for his wife and children, passages should occur which must here be omitted, and I have not thought it necessary to indicate where such omissions are made. It has been found necessary to make a few corrections of obvious verbal slips, but the number of such alterations has been kept down to the minimum. Francis Darwin. Preface. A German editor having written to me for an account of the development of my mind and character, with some sketch of my autobiography, I have thought that the attempt would amuse me, and might possibly interest my children or their children. I know that it would have interested me greatly to have read even so short and dull a sketch of the mind of my grandfather, written by himself, and what he thought and did, and how he worked. I have attempted to write the following account of myself, as if I were a dead man in another world looking back at my own life. Nor have I found this difficult, for life is nearly over with me. I have taken no pains about my style of writing. I was born at Shrewsbury on February 12, 1809, and my earliest recollection goes back only to when I was a few months over 4 years old, when we went near Abergele for sea bathing, and I recollect some events and places there with some little distinctness. My mother died in July 1817, when I was a little over 8 years old, and it is odd that I can remember hardly anything about her except her deathbed, her black velvet gown, and her curiously constructed work table. In the spring of the same year I was sent to a day school in Shrewsbury, where I stayed a year. I have been told that I was much slower in learning than my younger sister Catherine, and I believe that I was in many ways a naughty boy. By the time I went to this day school, kept by Rev. G. Case, minister of the Unitarian chapel in the High Street, Mrs. Darwin was a Unitarian and attended Mr. Case's chapel, and my father as a little boy went there with his elder sisters. But both he and his brother were christened and intended to belong to the Church of England, and after his early boyhood he seems usually to have gone to church and not to Mr. Case's. It appears, St. James's Gazette, December 15, 1883, that a mural tablet has been erected to his memory in the chapel, which is known as the Free Christian Church. My taste for natural history, and more especially for collecting, was well developed. I tried to make out the names of plants. Rev. W. A. Leighton, who was a schoolfellow of my father's at Mr. Case's school, remembers his bringing a flower to school and saying that his mother had taught him how, by looking at the inside of the blossom, the name of the plant could be discovered. Mr. Leighton goes on. This greatly roused my attention and curiosity, and I inquired of him repeatedly how this could be done. But his lesson was naturally enough not transmissible. Francis Darwin. and I collected all sorts of things, shells, seals, franks, coins, and minerals. The passion for collecting which leads a man to be a systematic naturalist, a virtuoso, or a miser, was very strong in me, and was clearly innate, as none of my sister or brother even had this taste. One little event during this year has fixed itself very firmly in my mind, and I hope that it has done so from my conscience having been afterwards sorely troubled by it. It is curious as showing that apparently I was interested at this early age in the variability of plants. I told another little boy, I believe it was Leighton, who afterwards became a well-known lichenologist and botanist, that I could produce variously colored polyanthuses and primroses by watering them with certain colored fluids, which was of course a monstrous fable, and had never been tried by me. I may here also confess that, as a little boy, I was much given to inventing deliberate falsehoods, and this was always done for the sake of causing excitement. For instance, I once gathered much valuable fruit from my father's trees, and hid it in the shrubbery, and then ran in breathless haste to spread the news that I had discovered a hoard of stolen fruit. I must have been a very simple little fellow when I first went to the school. A boy of the name of Garnett took me into a cake shop one day, and bought some cakes for which he did not pay, as the shopman trusted him. When we came out, I asked him why he did not pay for them, and he instantly answered, "Why, do you not know that my uncle left a great sum of money to the town on condition that every tradesman should give whatever was wanted, without payment, to any one who wore his old hat, and moved it in a particular manner?" And he then showed me how it was moved. He then went into another shop where he was trusted, and asked for some small article, moving his hat in the proper manner, and of course obtained it without payment. When we came out he said, "Now if you like to go by yourself into that cake shop," how well I remember its exact position, "I will lend you my hat, and you can get whatever you like if you move the hat on your head properly." I gladly accepted the generous offer, and went in and asked for some cakes, moved the old hat, and was walking out of the shop, when the shopman made a rush at me. So I dropped the cakes and ran for dear life, and was astonished by being greeted with shouts of laughter by my false friend Garnett. I can say in my own favour that I was as a boy humane, but I owe this entirely to the instruction and example of my sisters. I doubt indeed whether humanity is a natural or innate quality. I was very fond of collecting eggs, but I never took more than a single egg out of a bird's nest, except on one single occasion, when I took all, not for their value, but from a sort of bravado. I had a strong taste for angling, and would sit for any number of hours on the bank of a river or pond, watching the float, when at Maer, the house of his uncle, Josiah Wedgwood, I was told that I could kill the worms with salt and water, and from that day I never spitted a living worm, though at the expense probably of some loss of success. Once as a very little boy whilst at the day school, or before that time, I acted cruelly, for I beat a puppy, I believe, simply from enjoying the sense of power. But the beating could not have been severe, for the puppy did not howl, of which I feel sure, as the spot was near the house. The act lay heavily on my conscience, as is shown by my remembering the exact spot where the crime was committed. It probably lay all the heavier for my love of dogs being then, and for a long time afterwards, a passion. Dogs seemed to know this, for I was an adept in robbing their love from their masters. I remember clearly one other incident during this year, while at Mr. Case's daily school, namely, the burial of a dragoon soldier, and it is surprising how clearly I can still see the horse with the man's empty boots and carbine suspended to the saddle, and the firing over the grave. This scene deeply stirred whatever poetic fancy there was in me,